Working in a group is great for expanding your understanding of a topic, considering issues from multiple perspectives, and developing your collaborative skills. But it can also bring extra challenges that you wouldn't necessarily need to worry about when working by yourself. 3 key things you might want to think about are developing a coherent piece of work, practical management, and navigating interpersonal conflict. In this video, we're going to look at what you can do if conflict starts to emerge within the group. Now, it's important to start by saying that working with others isn't always easy, and you may notice some conflict based on opposing ideas, ways of working, cultural backgrounds, or just personalities. And this is a natural part of working as a group, and it doesn't necessarily mean that something's gone wrong. After all, as long as the work gets done, you don't have to get on with everyone you work with. But at certain times, you might find interpersonal conflict getting in the way of the work and just making it much harder than it needs to be. And if that does start to happen, here are some things you can try. Leaving fairness behind. One very common cause of conflict in group work is when some members of the group feel that the work isn't fairly distributed across the team and that some people are doing less than others. Now, fairness is important, but sometimes we become overly fixated on ensuring that everyone's contributing the exact same amount, and in reality it's rarely necessary or even possible to divide work evenly in a way that ensures everyone is putting in the exact same amount of time and energy. Some parts of the process will naturally require more work than others, and trying to ensure that everyone is writing the exact same number of words or working for the exact same amount of time can often become a greater source of stress than simply accepting that workloads are likely to differ, and that's okay. Of course, work allocation still needs to be reasonable. So if you find that one person is doing 90% of the work, then obviously that is something that needs to be addressed by the group. So when dealing with concerns around work allocation, rather than asking yourself, is this fair? It's usually easier in the long run to just ask yourself, is this reasonable? Or is this effective? Contracting. Group contracting is when everyone agrees to expectations that have been set in advance. So you can include expectations around things like individual contributions, deadlines for when certain pieces of work need to be completed, or attendance at meetings. Now, this doesn't have to be a particularly formal document like an actual legal contract, but it is useful to have some kind of written record that the group can refer to if one of the members isn't meeting the expectations. And remember, this agreement can always be altered at a later date if enough group members agree, so you can schedule a time to review the original contract and recommend changes. This kind of review is usually most effective after you've had about a third of the time allocated for the project, because that usually gives the group enough time to properly try out the initial agreement, but not so much time that it's too late if you want to start making any changes. Clarifying expectations. Sometimes conflict emerges within groups because different members have a different understanding about what's expected or appropriate when working as a group. And this is especially true if the group is made up of people from different cultural backgrounds. So, for example, although pretty much everyone would agree that it's important to communicate respectfully, when working with others, different people might have different expectations around what that respectful communication actually looks like in practice. So for one person, respectful communication might be quietly waiting for their turn to speak and not criticizing other people's ideas. Whereas for another person, respectful communication might be about building on or bouncing off the ideas of others in a constant back and forth exchange. And it's really not the case that one of these approaches is fundamentally better than the other. It's just a case of coming to a shared understanding about what communicating respectfully means and looks like for this particular group of people. So when you're starting out working with a new group, it can be useful to put some time aside to talk about what expectations and behaviours everyone feels will be most useful, and being as specific as possible about what those behaviours actually look like. So those are some things that you can try to get your group work off to a good start, but it is important to remember that you can't plan for every scenario in advance, especially when it comes to interpersonal conflict. You never really know how a group dynamic is going to play out or what issues will arise. So rather than trying to anticipate every possible thing that might happen and trying to prepare a solution in advance, it's fine to take a more responsive approach that aims to deal with issues as they come up.